Welcome everyone. This is Frank DiMora and Bill Salus, and today I had the privilege to be in Palm Spring to give a teaching about Psalm 83 and Ezekiel, the connection there, and I'm sure that we're going to be talking a little bit about that today. But I just want to say thanks so much, Bill, for being here. It was certainly a pleasure to have you there and to see me teach, and because I've seen you all over the net. And I know that you're pretty big in Bible prophecy, so it was really a blessing to see that you wanted to come to hear me speak. And so thanks for driving out and to be here with me. So
Absolutely.
we're going to have, what I'd like to do is just, it's really informal, Bill. I mean, we sit down, the two guys that are doing the ministry. We love the Lord. We have similar ministries of warning the people in the last days. And it certainly is a blessing. Now, just in case you don't know who Bill is, I'm going to hold these books up and hopefully we get a close-up on the books, the title of the book. And this is Israelistine. Israelistine. That's the Italian from me from New York. And this particular book is loaded with information about Psalm 83.
Absolutely.
And then you have the Revelation Road.
Revelation
Road. I just got through talking for 2 straight hours as fast as I can, so forgive me. Beyond the hope beyond the horizon. So I'm looking forward. I haven't had a chance to read it, but I'm looking forward because there's a lot of what I've been told, a lot of good information in these books, and I'm sure Bill will tell you how you can get that. Now, if you just turned in to my site, you'll be able to get my book by going to BibleProphecyMan.com. And once you see the link at the bottom, right below the picture, the front, and the cover with my ugly face on there, just click the link and you can download the book for free right at my site. So with that, how did you, I talked to a lot of people about how I got in this ministry, but I mean, you're really well known. I was just kind of curious as how you got into this ministry. Something happened to get you to a point where you're going to be a watcher on the wall.
Mm-hmm. Well, I became a Christian in 1991 while attending a Chuck Missler Bible study on the book of Revelation. And I had been a sojourner of truth. I ended up in Eastern religions and way out there in left field and all those different areas. And thankfully the Lord brought me into the fold. And when I get into something, Frank, I become obsessed. So every morning before work, I had a mortgage company at the time, I would study the Bible for a couple hours. And my inklings started leaning more and more into Bible prophecy because that's what attracted me toward the Lord through the Missler Bible study. So I just started writing a lot about, I got connected with Psalm 83 for some reason. There wasn't a lot on it, and a friend of mine named Dr. Arnold Fruchtenbaum had written a little bit about it, and I went to some luncheons with him. He had a ministry out in Irvine, California. And ultimately Arnold said you should maybe write a book about Psalm 83, which I felt was sort of my commission to do that. And that's when Israelistine was written and it was released in the summer of 2008. And it deals with the prelude, the event, and the aftermath of Psalm 83. It explains why it is probably an event that is for our time, an imminent prophecy, why it is a prophecy, not just a prayer, why it hasn't been fulfilled in the Old Testament, why it won't be fulfilled in the Armageddon campaign, and try to put it in the right spot. And I think the key, and by the way, my website is prophecydepot.com, like Home Depot, it's prophecydepot.com, and you can get my books here. The thing about Psalm 83, after the towers came down on September 11th, the world had a lot of questions, and quite frankly, it looked like the church got caught off guard. They didn't have a lot of explanations as to what happened. The best explanation I heard came from Chuck Smith of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesas.
And I know Chuck well. I studied under him, and that's when I received the Lord. I started to watch and listen to his the Word for Today, and so I know Chuck's teaching very well.
And he was pointing everybody's attention toward Ezekiel 38 and 39, the Gog and Magog invasion. He said you need to keep an eye on Iran and Russia and things. And I was fairly familiar with that prophecy, and I thought, I don't think that's exactly where I would point everybody just yet, although that was the best I'd heard, and that was really good. He said that. But I said, this is about terrorism, and terrorism is the ugly byproduct of the Arab-Israeli conflict, and the Bible speaks volumes about the Arab-Israeli conflict. And it does take your attention to Psalm 83, and That's why I did want to come to hear you speak today, because I've been watching some of your YouTubes and stuff and realized that you are really integrated in your studies of Psalm 83, much like I was too. So the Lord, I can tell, had drawn you in that direction just like He did me.
Yeah, and I'm there with you because I really believe that one of the next prophecies to be fulfilled will be Psalm 83. It hasn't been fulfilled. I haven't seen anything in the Old Testament that would show us that that prophecy is actually fulfilled yet. And you were there at the teaching today, and I pulled all of these, every single one of those nations, to show them exactly what's going on. They're all solidified together. They're all getting ready. The Hamas, the Fatah, all the Hezbollah, the raining down of the 70 missiles in the last 3 days. And so all of these things are pointing to that prophecy that hasn't been fulfilled yet. So I totally agree with you.
Right, absolutely. And so since Israelistine came out in the summer of 2008, there's been a lot of people that came alongside and said, hey, this is a prophecy. Chuck Missler, for instance, Hal Lindsey, Dr. David Reagan. These were all people who had really not explored the prophecy. But there are also others who come along and question really whether it is a prophecy.
And like you said, they think it's a prayer. And
Imprecatory prayer, they say the Psalms generally aren't that prophetic. And so they think it's merely a prayer of lament about Israel's enemies,
right?
Generally speaking.
Right. No, I understand.
Although Asaph, we're told in 2 Chronicles 29:30, is a seer, and the Hebrew word is chozah, which means a prophet. He's clearly a prophet, right? A beholder of vision is what that is. And so he wrote, I think it was 12 Psalms, and this is by far the most prophetic. And it is, to me, clearly a prophecy because it's dealing with a specific mandate, a specific group of populations that form a confederacy.
Right.
They have an intention to take the pastures of God for themselves as a possession after they wipe Israel off the map. And so what you have done in your studies and what I've done in my book as well, Israelistine, is identified who these populations are today and from the vernacular of Asaph's time. Right, about 3,000 years ago. And it's very stunning to recognize. And I call them an inner circle of Arab nations. They share common borders with Israel. Right. From North Lebanon, you've got Syria. Inside of Lebanon, you've got the Hezbollah. Right. And you've got Jordan, and you've got Saudi Arabia, you've got Egypt. Iraq is probably involved as well. You've got the Palestinians, you've got the Hamas. Now we would suspect we've got the Muslim Brotherhood in there as well.
They're definitely in there.
Yeah, so these...
Egypt in Saudi Arabia?
Egypt in there as well, yeah, thanks for catching that. And so these are the most notorious enemies of Israel since it became a nation in 1948. Right. Now, they're not listed in Ezekiel 38.
That's one of the differences I make between those two words.
Absolutely, and that is also very specific about what populations are listed in Ezekiel 38.
Oh, yeah.
So we've got specific countries and terrorist populations listed in Psalm 83 that aren't in Ezekiel 38's confederacy.
Right.
So that's a standout situation. And I think the other thing you pointed out today that I think that the viewers should understand also is that the Israel that Ezekiel 38 verses 8 through 13 describes doesn't in full exist today. And that's a Israel that is brought out of the nations of the world, brought back from the sword in the latter days. Check that off. Those have been happening. Right. But they're dwelling securely in the midst of the land, and the Hebrew word is tabor, right? That means right smack dab in the center of the promised land. Right. Probably even considering annexing Jordan after Psalm 83. A little more,
exactly.
And they are dwelling without walls, bars, nor gates. They're dwelling securely. Right. And they have an abundance of wealth because Russia is coming for great plunder and booty. Right. So I think it's quite evident that Israel is not 100% intact just yet.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, while you're talking about that, I'm in the bars, walls, and gates. I'll show them a picture here. That when I went to Israel, I took this picture. I don't know how well it's going to come out, but you can see that the walls, bars, and gates are there now. And in the teaching today that I was telling the people that is to me a major difference because they're in Israel right now, but they're not secure. There's no way. I mean, like I said today, I showed them in today's news. Just in the past 3 days, there were 70 missiles that were shot into the Israeli territory. So they're not living in any kind of security. And obviously that wall that's 20 foot high and 320 miles long, it shows you that they're keeping the enemy out. So the prophecies are split. One time when that war happens, it's obviously going to be when they have the wall. But Ezekiel is very adamant about telling us that when that attack comes, they will be living in security, thinking that they're safe. And that's when the Russian Magog and Gog, they come down in with obviously a ram. And that would be the major, because it's almost like you're me and I'm you. I mean, we're thinking on the same line here. So it's exciting to know this so we can share it.
Well, the Hebrew words for dwelling securely are Yeshav V'Tash. And they show up numerous places in the Old Testament together. And when they typically show up, they mean dwelling securely, literally dwelling securely, usually achieved through a military conquest. So that therefore the country can dwell securely. Israel, because of the Psalm 83 countries that we just mentioned, cannot dwell securely presently. And yet Israel is dwelling securely when Russia puts its coalition together to come to invade Israel. Right. Now, when will Israel dwell securely? We only have to go back 10 chapters in Ezekiel to Ezekiel 28. Verse, I think it's 25 through 28. And it says that Israel will dwell securely when those around Israel that despise them God deals judgments upon them. Mm-hmm. And so then they will dwell securely. So there are those around Israel that despise them. I call them that inner ring. I call the outer countries, the much broader countries of Russia and Iran and Libya and Ezekiel 38, an outer circle. So, and I label those in Israelistine. So they will dwell securely when judgments are levied upon those around them that despise them, according to Ezekiel 28. Well, how are those judgments levied? Okay. And Ezekiel 38 and 39, we're given 52 specific passages with every kind of detail imaginable. Yeah, but Psalm 18 is only 18 passages.
Right.
And we have to dig into the prophets to find out how will God respond to it. Asaph petitions in verses 9, 10, and 11 that the Lord would deal with them as Gideon did with the Midianites and as Barak did to the Canaanites. And so you go back into Judges chapters 4 through 8 to understand those battles, and what they were really pretty much miraculous battles of Arabs who oppressed the Jews, the Israelis, and they were the IDF of that time, the Israeli forces of that time, were empowered by the Lord to defeat those oppressors. Right. And when they defeated them...
Outnumbered by troops, too.
Outnumbered, they were miraculous defeats, but when they defeated them, you'll never find again in history or in the Bible that the Midianites or the Canaanites ever oppressed Israel again. And I think that's one of the clues to realize that Psalm 83 hasn't found fulfillment yet, because those countries are still oppressing Israel presently. So we find that. Now, you also find that in those battles there were no Israeli casualties. You can't find any Israeli casualties, which is interesting. Well, does this mean maybe there won't be a lot of damage to Israel when they tackle the Psalm 83 war as well? So, and it also suggests, what they did it sort of on their own. I mean, there was no foreign military assistance.
Right.
So, because a lot of people wonder, is America going to be involved, or other nations going to be involved in Psalm 83?
Well, I always point to Zechariah, and I mentioned this about 10 times today in the teaching, Zechariah 12:3, that Israel is going to be hanging out to dry, and we're seeing that. The disbanding of the friendship that I was showing today with Egypt and Turkey, and the United States has definitely thrown Israel under the bus now with Barack Obama. So I believe you're right.
Well, it's interesting when we talk about how the Lord will execute those judgments on those around Israel that despise them. I talked about Ezekiel 38, and Ezekiel 38 verses 18 through Ezekiel 39 verses 6 clearly talks about the Lord. There's an earthquake, every man's sword will be against his brother, there's fire and hail and brimstone, and it's really the Lord single-handedly, it appears to be stopping that. That would be what a lot of people believe. Not necessarily America or the IDF or whatever.
Right, exactly.
Single-handedly, and we find in Isaiah 63, when the Lord comes at the Armageddon campaign, He's mighty to save, He's by Himself, He's single-handedly defeating the Antichrist and the Armageddonites. Right. Not the same battle as Ezekiel 38, but the point I'm getting to, just like when Pharaoh's army were taken out single-handedly by the Lord by the converging waters of the Red Sea at the time of the Exodus, that's not what we're finding in Psalm 83. We're finding that the Israeli Defense Forces of today appear to be the instrument that the Lord uses.
To take them
And
out.
Ezekiel 37:10, it's interesting, talks about an exceedingly great army of Israel. And of course, look what they become. They're ranked number 10 in the world.
Really,
right
I
now.
mean, and they're one of the smallest nations, and they're the strongest military. I mean, that way. And one of the things that I point out to people, because a lot of people will come up to me and say, "Do you know that Ezekiel 38 is the fulfillment of the Revelation, the Battle of Armageddon?" I said, "Wait a minute. You know, in the Battle of Armageddon, we know that can't be it, because in that battle, everybody dies. Nobody is alive. But Ezekiel tells us that 5/6 will be killed, so that means you have a remnant that's going to be left over to go back where they came from. So right there, that disqualifies the Battle of Armageddon. Would you agree with that?
I think that's a good argument for that. I also think that Ezekiel is very specific about 9 populations he lists, Magog, Meshach, Tubal,
Right.
etc.
Yeah.
Whereas you'll find in Joel 3:2 and Zechariah 12, all the nations of the world are listed.
Right.
It's a broad brush on all the nations of the world. That's quite clear,
Exactly.
not just 9 specific nations.
Right.
So I think that's another one. Also, I think that the fact that Israel will be cleansing the land for 7 months and burning the weapons or converting them into fuel for 7 years. Those are telltale signs that, first of all, cleansing the land is a ritual requirement of the law. Also, they would have to certainly cleanse the land of all the dead hordes of Gog.
Right.
And they're going to put those in the valley of Hamon Gog, which means hordes of Gog.
Right.
So they would do that for pestilence and things like that. But they also, that was part of the law, the ritual requirement.
Right.
And it's mentioned 3 times they're going to be cleansing the land. So I think what we find there is that the way that Israel responds to their divine victory from the Lord, Jehovah, to the Ezekiel invasion is to reinstate the Mosaic law. They're going to want to rebuild their temple if it hasn't been built by then. And we find evidence is that they got to cleanse the land.
Right.
And burning the weapons for 7 years, if that was the Armageddon campaign that you're talking about, they're trying to compare it.
Right.
That means they're going to be burning the weapons 7 years into the
millennium.
Messianic kingdom.
Right.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. Christ is the source, at that point.
Exactly. And I know that sitting under Chuck, listening to all his teachings, that we believe that there's a good possibility, a strong possibility, that after the war of Ezekiel, that's when the Antichrist will come up and confirm a covenant to begin the tribulation at that time.
I concur with that. I think that Psalm 80, if I were to sequence these events, and we're talking about the broader prophecies,
Right.
we're not talking about the intricate prophecies inside of them, like the destruction of Damascus and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I would sequence it as Psalm 83. I think it's imminent. I think that the only thing standing between the climactic concluding Arab-Israeli war of Psalm 83 is a couple fragile peace treaties between Egypt and Israel and Jordan and Israel. And I think that with the Muslim Brotherhood, advent of them coming into town and into power now, after being repressed for well over 40 years, this is their time in the sun, and they're going to make haste to march toward Jerusalem and liberate Hamas, etc. I think that prophecy could happen at any given time. I think that will then lead toward the Ezekiel 38 battle, and I do believe they are both pre-tribulation events.
Yeah, so do I. So do I, exactly. There's so much evidence that, I presented, I think it took me probably an hour and a half just on Psalm 83, pulling together all of the nations that made these alignments, and especially with, in the beginning of 2011, when I put up my site, given a warning, the Lord just showed me the whole scenario about what's going to happen in a year concerning the Muslim Brotherhood, because he told me that the Muslim Brotherhood would go into election, or they would be elected. And this came at a time when the Muslim Brotherhood stood up and said, we're not even going to run a candidate.
I remember that.
So, and all this is still at my prophecy site. And this is what the Lord told me. I put it down. He said that the Egypt was going to break off the peace treaty. They were going to install Sharia law. And all of that is happening. And they would attack Israel. And we know that Marcy, with the Muslim Brotherhood, they hate Israel. And I showed a video in Egypt where 2 million people are standing in an entire square and they're yelling, "On to Jerusalem," and to destroy Jerusalem. So if you know all of the things that you're pointing out in Psalm 83, there's no question in my heart that the Lord has imparted wisdom to us, and we're seeing the events come together to finish, or to set off that attack. And I believe with the new information that just came out today, where Benjamin Netanyahu said that he's going to have to go into the Gaza Strip to stop these people from sending off these mortars, that this might be the catalyst to start the war.
It could be a number of things. Remember that Hezbollah campaign in 2006 was triggered by two captured Israeli defense.
Right.
I mean,
Yes.
it could be a flotilla out in the Mediterranean. It could be a number of simple things, or it could be a Israeli strike against Iran's nuclear sites that Iran then calls on Syria and Hezbollah and Hamas as their
Right.
proxies. But I think what the point is, we don't know exactly how it's going to be triggered, and I don't think we're given the details
Right.
sufficiently enough to know. But I think it's obvious to guys like you and I that are watching this that it could happen at any. We could wake up one morning and it could find fulfillment. And I
expect that, to tell you, Bill. I expect that one day somebody call me up on the phone and say, watch television, watch the TV, So I think it's going to happen without a question. I mean, we know for sure that this is a generation because of Matthew 24. Everything has been fulfilled. There's nothing left except for the tribulation, the rapture of the church, the Psalm 83, Ezekiel, and not only was whatever is out there, but most of the prophecies are already fulfilled. Mm-hmm. And it's supposed to happen when Israel was born as a nation again, which is another part of the prophecy.
It's interesting. I think there's a very good comparison between the process of Israel becoming a nation and the process of Psalm 83 finding fulfillment. Let me explain what I mean. I'll try to do it fairly in the abbreviated version. I have a whole teaching on this coming out in my new book called Existential Threat, which will be coming out by Christmas. But we're going to wake up one morning, maybe in 2013, and Psalm 83 is going to be finding fulfillment. But for guys like you and I, we're not going to be surprised by that. Because we've been watching since 1948, 1967, 1973. Psalm 83 is a prophecy in process. It's going to find fulfillment. We're going to wake up, and it's going to happen. It's just like when people woke up on May 14th, 1948,
right.
And Israel was a nation.
And midnight on the 15th, they were attacked by those same nations.
Absolutely. But the process for someone that was paying attention should not have been surprised on May 14th, 1940. They could have seen in 1897 when Theodor Herzl wrote his book, Der Judenstaat, which means the Jewish state in German, that he was the sympathy for a Jewish state, and Zionism was forming and whatnot.
Right.
World War I, the Lord Balfour came out with a declaration wanting to give land, much more land than Israel's got today, out through what was then called Transjordan, which would actually include modern-day Jordan and Israel. That didn't happen. Britain didn't execute on the dime on that like they were supposed to, subjecting the Jews to the Holocaust in World War II. Yeah. And then, of course, the United Nations after World War II in Resolution 181, the partition plan, Israel's going to become a nation. But we shouldn't have been surprised. I was born in 1953, so I was surprised because it was already in existence when I was born.
Okay.
But the point is that we shouldn't be surprised when Psalm 83 happens either, because we have had plenty of evidence that this is about to happen.
Yeah, I see it, and every day, that's one of the first things that I post every single day now is what's going on with Israel in relation to those very nations, because almost every single day, and I'm finding, you're probably finding the same thing, in the 1980s, prophecies were coming through. We can see the evidence of the prophecies, but in the last 5 years, I'm being inundated with news. It's hard to keep up with everything that's going on around the world. And this is a byproduct, and I tell the people over and over again, of Mark chapter 13, verse 8, where the Lord said about the birth pangs. And Paul talked about the peace and the safety, and then the sudden destruction come. Now, in my teaching today, I told the people, look, as far as I'm concerned, from 1979, when they got the Egyptians and Israel to make that peace agreement, all the way up, they've been calling for peace and safety ever since that, so that part of the prophecy is fulfilled, and now we're on the verge of the second part, the destruction that's coming. And for people like you and I, we see it physically coming together, and it hurts my heart knowing that we have the majority of the people around the world who don't have a clue about anything that the Lord showed us in either one of those prophecies. So I'm doing whatever I can, and I know that you're doing. These books are going to be fantastic knowledge for people to see and to read about, so that they will be able to tell their family members. But where do you see, as far as Ezekiel is going to come after, obviously we just got through saying this, after the Psalm. But so that we know there's going to be a break. Now, what's your thought about how long it's going to be after the walls come down, after Psalm 83, before the Ezekiel? What do you think?
Time frames between the two epic events,
Right,
yeah.
right.
I'll give you my thoughts on that. I do want to say one thing. You know, when you talk about the birth pangs, and we talk about these prophecies, these are world-changing events. These are game-changing.
Yeah, they're definitely.
And they will affect everybody adversely, and they will affect people in America a lot, too.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about birth pangs, I think the important thing to realize is when these things happen, just like a woman about to give labor,
Right.
her contractions become more intense, and they become more frequent, and you cannot stop that.
That's right.
And so
It's coming.
we've got this coming, and when it comes, it's not going to be stoppable, and it's going to happen rapidly, and each event is going to build upon the other more powerfully.
Right.
So we talk about Psalm 83 is going to happen. I don't think Israel is going to fight a long, protracted war there. They never have. They really can't afford one.
That's right. They can't afford it, because if they allow it to go on like that, Israel would, they would have so many casualties and possibly be defeated. But we know in the scriptures that's not going to happen. So they're going to have to move fast. They're going to have to move fast. So why don't we take a short break, and we'll come back and we'll continue on with the conversation. All right, so we're back, and we were talking about the timing, about the between Psalm 83 and Ezekiel. So
yeah, and I don't think that there's going to be a lot of time between the two, Frank. There's a couple reasons for that, but remember that Israel is going to have to become the Israel that Ezekiel described. Mm-hmm. They're going to have to tear down the wall, just like the Berlin. But the Berlin Wall came down pretty quick.
Absolutely.
And they're going to have to probably become quite bountiful, because Israel's coming after plunder and booty. Mm-hmm. Now, some people think that's going to be their own inherent national resources, the gas, the oil, whatever. But the Hebrew word, the spoil, is shalal, and it means spoil from the despoiled. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a combination of taking some Arab plunder after the Israeli war, and also their own natural resources. But Israel has to be wealthy, and they have to be safe. And that's going to take a little bit of time to develop that. Right. But I don't think Russia's going to want to wait very long to harness that adversarial. All the Muslims are going to be upset.
Right, exactly.
They're going to be very upset, and there's going to be prisoners of war. Israel's going to be probably grabbing some land and taking some booty.
Right.
And Russia's going to play off of that, in my estimation, and form an evil plan. You can allow Israel to get away with that, Iran and Turkey and Libya. We need to come together and stop it.
Right.
And I personally think the rapture may happen in and around that time. And if that happens, there'll be no Western militaries much to try to prevent.
Right.
The only thing standing between Russia and its coalition from being the superpower at that point, if the raptures happen, is Israel. So I think it's very possible that Russia's going to move fairly quickly after Psalm 83. Give it a year or two, maybe not a whole lot longer.
Right. I mean, the generals, I pointed out today at that teaching, that the generals in Russia are saying, if you attack Iran, we're going to attack you. If you attack Syria, we're going to attack you. And I even gave you the documentation that they're saying we'll use nuclear weapons.
Absolutely.
So Israel's going to have to move right away to detour that, otherwise they'd be incinerated. And we know
it's happening.
God is going to sanctify His name, and He's picked a certain day. So where does this all lead us? This is all leading us to a good question. Are you saved yet? I mean, if all these things are true, and I know that they're true, and he knows that they're true, we're seeing them on the news, playing out in quotes. You need to give your life to the Lord Jesus Christ, and you need to do it today, not wait, because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You may go out this door and die, and if you don't know the Lord, you're on your way to hell. And so we want to make sure that you have an opportunity to make sure that you know what to do, and that's to ask the Lord into your life. Ask Him to forgive you. He will forgive you, and He'll write your name in the book of life. And you will be born again, and you will have the Lord Jesus in your heart, and you will have the wisdom, and you will know what we know. And we're hoping that our gathering together here would encourage you to study and to understand, to help other people.
Salvation is today. Today is the day of your salvation. Don't put it off. You could have a heart attack. You're one breath away from eternity. One heartbeat away from eternity. It is a gift of God, according to Ephesians 2. It's in Romans 10 says, if you confess with your lips and believe in your heart, and confess that Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised Him from the dead, you shall be saved. It's a faith. It's a gift that you must receive. It's not of works. So Frank, I mean, our hearts pour out to your viewers that don't wait till all this stuff starts happening in the Middle East. Your lives will be adversely affected. You can make that decision right now. And why? Because you pointed this out in your teaching in Luke 21:36, I believe it is. Jesus said, "Watch therefore and pray always that you may be counted worthy to escape all these things." And that's a whole other session about the rapture and things.
Right, exactly.
But the point is, Jesus loves you. He knows the number of hairs on your head. And you, by accepting Him, He is with you immediately, and you can get through these things with His guidance and blessing.
And you're definitely going to need Him in the coming months as we start to see, not only we're talking about the Middle East, but we're talking, look at the economy and everything that's going on around the world and how it's coming down. Antichrist is on his way, and we know that it will be part and parcel for bringing in a new economy, a new way of doing business. So you'd rather see the Lord's face instead of the Antichrist face, that's for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
So today would be a good day to have your name written in the Book of Life. So
if you need to know how or more information, prophecydepot.com. My phone number is there. What's your website?
it's BibleProphecyMan.com, and the link will be right there, so you can get in touch with me as well. So God bless you all. Thanks for turning in, and we ask you to tell your friends about it and let them know what we're doing and have them tune in as well. God bless.